there needs to be a distinction made. Because you see where it says the first commandment?
See.
Okay. A lot of us think that that's referring to this is the very first commandment that was given that had a promise attached. I mean, when I look at that, that's what comes to mind. I don't know about you guys, but actually, when you look at it in the Greek, that's not what that means. The Greek word there is protos. And no, I knew someone was going to say that. It is not protos. That's the word. It looks an awful lot like it, but it's protos, and it literally does mean first, but it means it in more of the idea of primary or of most importance. So when we read this verse, it isn't just trying to say that this commandment was the very first one with a promise, even though it actually is. It's saying that it's the chief, the big one among those promises. So my question is, why is this one so important? Go ahead, Cass.
If you can get this one right, it will make all your other relationships going forward much easier.
Can you think of something in the Bible that says that, like a verse possibly that kind of iterates that a little in a certain way? If you can't, that's cool. I know that look. I give it whenever I get a page to go to the manager's office at work. Okay. So if you flip over to the book of Proverbs in chapter 22 and verse 6, you'll read this verse. Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. This promise is an important commandment because it sets the stage for the rest of life. If you want a child to live a God-honoring life, then let them start honoring God at an early age in one of the most tangible and simple ways imaginable. Obey your parents. You guys with me? Haven't lost anybody? We're on board? We're not bored? Technically, Kess, you're right. That is the parental side. But at that stage, isn't it the parent's responsibility to train them up? It goes both ways. It's a parent's duty to raise the child, but at the same time, the child needs to obey their parents. So that's a two-way street. But the thing is that while this comes from the passage in Ephesians comes from the kid side, and the passage from Proverbs, the first part at least, comes from a parental side, the end result is the same. When they are old, it's strictly about the kids. They won't depart from that. Any questions? Oh, I was about ready to go on. The Lady Unger decided to just, drop stuff in there. Cool. Oh, and Yes. Oh, great. Now they're all coming. How old is old? I don't know. I study Greek, not Hebrew. I honestly don't know, Lady Unger. I would assume, without grabbing my concordance and flipping through it, I would assume that the word for old would probably be more representative of the term grown or come to full stature, representative of being a man. But that's just a guess at this stage. I'll take a look at it after the study. Now, going back to this commandment, it's the first one, or the main one, the most important one, with a promise. What's the promise? That may go well with you. Okay. Anything else about that promise? Okay. That you will live long in the land. Yep. So, where might you find this whole idea of obeying your parents and living long in the land? The way that that's annotated sure makes it look like that's quoted somewhere else, or that's a quote from somewhere else.
I'm pretty sure that's in the Ten Commandments.
Yeah. Yep. Exodus 20, verse 12. Exactly. Though, if you look it up there, it reads a little bit differently. It says, honor your father and mother. That's the same. That your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Sounds a little different. It still talks about living long, but in the Old Testament it talks about in the land that God's giving them. Here it just says in the land. Now, in Ephesians, this is almost a verbatim translation of Exodus 20:12 in the Septuagint, in the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And it also this verse is also, by the way, found in Deuteronomy 5. It reads pretty much the exact same thing there as well. Now, God's initial promise was to the Israelites, as you guys said. Yeah, they're getting ready to go in the Promised Land. When this is originally quoted, they're chilling out at Mount Sinai. God's writing down this stuff on a couple stone tablets, and so He says, "Listen, my promise to you is that so long as you obey." In the principle of obeying your parents, one of these commandments that I'm giving you, you will maintain your position. You will be able to dwell in the land that I am giving you. I'm offering it to you, and you will be able to stay there. You will raise families and have generations that will continue there because of your obedience to me. Paul in Ephesians, and again, this isn't just Paul. Paul is writing the book of Ephesians under divine inspiration. So this isn't like Paul twisting scripture. This is God applying what he said earlier in a different manner. He takes that promise and applies it to us. And for us, it's not so much about remaining in some, quote, promised land, but it's about having an extended lifespan, as we understand it, because of our diligence in obeying our parents and, by extension, God Himself. That makes sense? Griff, I wonder if sometimes you feel the exact same thing that I do. I'm just sitting over here, and when no one talks, I'm just like, the sound of silence. Oh my gosh, Unger. That was the best VeggieTales movie, by the way. It'll be so great, oh, I can hardly wait, 'cause we're going to the promised land. Josh and the Big Wall. That was a great one. I'll have to sing that later after the Bible study when the recording stops. Okay.
Duet time. Do it.
Yeah, I'm not doing that now.
Good call. Good call.
Let's go on to verse 4. Can I get someone to read that? Just one verse, just verse 4. Yes, that's an interesting point. You're correct. Not every obedient kid lives long. You're absolutely right. Now, does that make God a liar here? Ooh, got quiet when I asked that question.
Depends on your definition of what it means that things are going well with you. And if you're measuring long life only in physical terms. True, Augers.
He didn't say may, he said a Greek word. Go look that one up. No, but I don't believe, for me, I don't believe this is a principle that's straight up, you're going to live long. And I think Doctor's kind of on the right track. You know, the overarching principle, obedient kids, ones that aren't as rebellious, tend to be, more adherent to things that are good for them. Usually. If you're not going out and testing things that are bad for you, like drugs, alcohol, riotous living, as the prodigal, the parable of the prodigal son put it. Chances are you live much more of a healthy and stable life, and therefore have a much greater chance of living long. I see Onger's hand raised. It's actually a little hand raise. I can't high five him. What the heck? You came from the other side, man.
Wrong way.
What is this?
Back it up.
What is this?
No, I was going to basically say what you said. I would also say that this would be interpreted both in the Old Testament and the New as a general principle, not necessarily a this equals that sort of equation, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
very
we
much
tend to take it a little too Western sometimes.
Yeah, it's... And in a straight sense, it kind of plays into something a little bit later. And I might need a little bit of a reminder to run back around to it, but I feel like this isn't the first time we're going to see that idea in this. All right. I'm still waiting for someone to read verse 4. I can read it if no one wants it.
I'll be glad to do it.
Okay, thank you, Cass.
But bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord.
Okay. So full disclosure, I loved this verse when I was younger. Oh man. This was one of the best verses in the Bible when I was a kid. Because you could, if Dad got mad at you, if he was threatening to bring down, bring the belt, you're like, Father, do not provoke your children to anger. And well, yeah, yeah. And Doctor has picked up on the flaw in my reasoning. See, I knew the first part really well. But the winged dad kind of straightened me out when he showed me the entirety of this verse. Now, out of curiosity, how many of you were like that? How many of you were, whenever dad got mad at you, you thought, you're not supposed to provoke your children to wrath? How many of you have been there? I'm just curious. Because I know I was captain, I was piloting that ship, man. Yeah, I put on the captain's hat and we went out to sea on that boat. I mean, whenever Dad got upset at you for whatever reason, you think of this verse. Dad, you're not supposed to provoke your kid to anger. Well, see, for me, that was less of an indictment on him as a father, as it was an indication of my own pride and stubbornness as a kid. And that's often, honest to goodness, that's often still true of me, even today. So let's dive into the Greek here. The word here is unpronounceable. No, the word here is paragitzo.
Odd word to use.
Sorry, paragitzo. And it means to anger someone by really getting under their skin and like pushing their buttons. Just someone that like needles you, knows how to really tick you off. If you want to go literally, the word is actually translates just straight up. If you take the word meanings, it's or not a contraction, but like a or compound word. There we go. And the two words put together mean to become angry from right beside. It's someone who understands a person's limits and their personal space and intentionally invades them to really just kind of drive them up a wall. The whole point was to just get them mad. That's the whole point. Kind of what we would call a troll. In this community, that would be someone that's a troll to a certain degree, but this person's like really intimate. They just know what ticks you off and they really aim right for it. Torment, that's a good one, Cass. Thank you. Now, with that in mind, that really doesn't sound a whole lot like what my dad did. Whenever I got mad at Dad, it wasn't because he was trying to push my buttons. It wasn't where he was trying to, just torment me. What he was doing was he was exemplifying not the first half of the verse, but the second. And this is where chapter 4 comes back around to us. Remember chapter 4 where we talked about the word instead? This is that come back around. There's the don't do this, don't provoke your children to wrath. And then it's immediately followed by the instead do this. Remember last week how Unger talked about redeeming something, redeeming the time because the days are evil? This is more of that. Don't reprimand your kids in such a way that it makes them just furious. But just like the children are commanded to do, obey the Lord or obey your parents in the Lord, fathers are to raise their kids in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. None of these commandments exist apart from that one singular idea that we have never moved from. We have been building on it ever since chapter 1. Those two words, and they keep coming up, and they don't leave throughout the entirety of Ephesians, in Christ. Everything about this book is hinged upon those two words. So, how about verses 5 through 8? Someone other than Kess, because she's read everything so far.
I can.
Ooh, Lady Unger gonna read verses? Up, she beat you to the punch, Unger. Beside, the ladies first. Go ahead, Miss Ungerth. Mrs. Ungerth.
Slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ. not by the way of eye service as people pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is a slave or free.
Out of curiosity, what translation was that?
ESV?
Really? My ESV actually reads it as bondservant. Cool. Okay. Nice.
It says bondservant in the footnotes.
Okay. So it just was like I prefer this word as over this one. All right. Sweet. So, let's get real here. This passage is a little weird because slavery, by that name, is, in this day and age, pretty universally frowned upon. So it may be tempting to look at, verses 5 through 8 and think, I'm not a slave. And last time I checked, I don't own any slaves. So I don't see how this part of the Bible can apply to me. Yes, doctor, I do. I remember a thread about that too. Yes. And you'd be right about one thing. You're not a slave and you're not a master. You're right. Not in the way in which Paul was writing this back in the first century. But there's a principle here or just because there's a principle aimed at another group of people, that doesn't mean that it can't see application in other situations. First off, you look at verse 5 and it says earthly masters. That's a neat little point that Paul makes. He takes particular note that while these slaves may have had masters, those masters could only command the body. They can only command the flesh. It's like, do this. And it's like, okay, I am your master. They were master of the body, but they were not master of the spirit. That's an interesting distinction to make, that, you can tell someone what to do in the body, but you can't tell the spirit how to react to that command. That's up to you. And that's what ties in to the rest of the passage, particularly in this little next section where Paul talks about this sincere heart. I love that. I love the sincere heart. It really takes particular aim at the possibility of hypocrisy or hidden agendas. And that just flows perfectly right into the last few words of verse 5, which are, as you would Christ. You're not just serving men, you're serving Christ. And verse 6 carries the same thought. None of this eye service as people pleasers. And oh man, is that a great description. What a great description. Okay, I'm going to stop there because Ongarth raised his hand.
So does this mean I should never stand up to my boss and always just do what he says?
I'll let you guys answer that one. Well, see, the thing is that I specifically remember in your own life, Ongarth, where you did take a stand against your boss. So, yeah, you may be the most qualified one to answer that. Oh, well, that's a good one. Technically, I helped to get my boss. Wait, what the world? Yeah, she's got a good one. but I didn't know about that one until just now. So I think based upon your responses, you guys are kind of saying, no, it's not okay to always just take what your boss says and just do it without thought. Are we pretty well agreed on that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Ongarth, do you want me to tell the story, or would you like to tell that later?
You can go ahead and tell a story.
I only remember bits and pieces of it. You maybe have to fill in the details, but as I recall, there was a form of some kind that you were asked to fill.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that you were asked to fill out at your company, which basically said that you weren't doing your job. And so everybody's supposed to fill it out, and you're supposed to turn it in to like your manager or something. And as I recall, you got your dad to look over it, and you finally refused to do it.
Yeah. It was a performance improvement plan, and part of
That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah, part of it. It's kind of the kiss of death in this job, which is odd. They're having everybody sign it, but it was a big political maneuvering thing. So everybody signed this piece of paper, and part of the paper said that this is all basically my fault, and I take full responsibility for it. And well, I do take responsibility for my performance. I was not under the goals that they had set for me, and I there were other things that were contributing that were not were outside my control. So I elected to not sign it. And I just handed the paper back to him and said, "So I appreciate this conversation, but I'm not going to sign this and see what happens next." And they let me not sign it, which is unusual. A lot of times they'll fire you on the spot for that. But I felt very strongly that it would be a lie for me to agree to sign that piece of paper agreeing to what it was claiming. And normal, I'm all about taking responsibility, but there were things on that paper that just were not true. And it was, I just decided that it was just not going to happen. And they, actually, it was interesting. A couple of the other managers in the room came to me later and said, "Hey, thanks for not signing that," even though they were telling me to, because they didn't want to stand up to their boss about it. So the question that I would have is, how do we mesh? Because obviously that's not obeying the will of my boss. The will of my boss wanted me to, well, I guess technically it was, but it's not obeying the will of my boss's boss, because their will wanted me to sign the paper. How do I mesh that with this set of verses here then? Right, because I think we all agree there's times where we should stand up to our boss. I mean, I just did it this week about something else, and I know that a lot of you guys here have as well.
Not an easy answer, is it? There's a bunch of typing going on. Uh-oh. That's always a good start. Ask a nice long question. Think I lost connection. Oh, looks like she was right. Okay, she's back. Guess your message popped up. I think I lost connection. Literally 2 seconds later, you disconnected.
Maybe I asked the question too early, because maybe we need more context about this. Were you going to go into more context on this?
Yes.
Okay. We'll circle back to my question then.
Okay. Sorry, need a glass of water. All right. Must find place in notes again. So okay, right there. We were talking about, the eye service as people pleasers. It's put yourself in the situation of a slave, in Roman times. Just drop yourself there for a second. It's probably not too hard to imagine that any slave would work hard to try and earn a little favor from his master. You don't want to be treated badly. You want to get a little bit of, earn a little bit of, a good mojo with the boss. Maybe get on his good side. Benefits for good behavior. Maybe be a little lenient. Put the whip away. Just some privileges, right? But for the Christian, that sincerity of heart demands that our ambition be not self-service, but devotion to a greater master, to Jesus Christ. And that's, of course, exactly what the last bit of verse 6 and the whole of verse 7 say. Doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with good will as to the Lord and not to man. I guess we're going to come back to that. And so, why is all that important? Because Jesus is our final master. Well, I'm going to back that up. I see Cass with a raised hand.
I don't mean to take up extra time, but I think it applies. When I got my boss fired, it was because he was being unethical. And had I let it go on, I actually probably could have gotten a promotion for the favor of overlooking what he was doing. But obviously that wasn't the right thing to do. So I got him fired. I did not get a promotion. And I think that's in line with sincerity of heart, because what he was doing was going to hurt people.
And I think we're really starting to touch on where the line is drawn. Because that oneness, one of the translations that I looked at, the oneness of I think it was oneness or singleness of heart. Everything you do is of singleness of heart. With one goal, you do everything for one purpose. And then Paul reiterates that. He says, look, everything you do unto God, not unto men. And if we behold something that is, unethical, unmoral, goes and doesn't line up with what, we would hold to, we render a service to a greater master than any here on earth. And so this again falls back on us. If we are representatives of God's character here on this earth, then it falls to us, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago, it falls to us to call that out, to reveal sin, to reveal the darkness with the light. Wow, did you just quote Kierkegaard in the Bible study? That's impressive. That, man, give her a gold star. That was, whew, did not see that one coming. Hold on. But yeah, absolutely applicable. So going back to where we're at, Jesus is the final master. He has all the authority, and he knows our every action, every deed. And in the end, as verse 8 says, he will repay for every good deed we have done in his service. But at the same time, that's not to be done out of our own self-service, but because we love our God and we dedicate our lives to him. In verse 9, I'll go ahead and read that one. Masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening. knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and that there is no partiality with him. So if Paul's spending 4 verses on the slaves isn't enough, he reverses the role on them. He says, look, masters, don't think that I don't have any words for you. Don't threaten the slaves. You may be master now, but there is a greater master who is higher than you, and one day you will have to answer to him. And when he judges, he doesn't care if you were a slave, if you were free, or you were rich, poor, lowly, or a master of men. He shows no partiality. So what? Well, there are a lot of practical applications here that don't really need a lot of explanation. Paul does a pretty good job of doing that on his own. But there is one I kind of want to circle back on, and I've kind of hinted that it's the one we've talked about it a lot, and that's the idea of an employer. I know slavery isn't really a thing like it was in Paul's day, but I'll explain this through an example in my own life. Recently, the store that I work for got a new district manager, and my notes just froze. There we go. Now, you guys have probably heard me talking within the last couple months that it's been really busy in the like October the 23rd, we got over 1,000, or not over 1,000. We got nearly 1,000 boxes in shipment just in one day. It was awesome. And this new DM, the district manager, as a lot of my coworkers have described him, is very by the book. He's really like a very strict adherent to corporate policy and kind of a no nonsense guy. Now, the thing you have to understand about our store is that we are weird. And that does apply to the people that work there, but probably even more so it applies to the situation. Most of the stores from the company are they're standalone. They exist on their own. It's just a singular store. There's one entrance. You go in the store, and there's no other stores attached. You just walk in, you go in, you find your book, and then you leave. Typically. But our store doesn't just have multiple entrances. It's an anchor store into the major mall for the area. We have people come from multiple states to come to our mall. We also have the most easily accessible parking lot in the entire mall complex, which means that we get a ton of people passing through our store that don't even stop to look around. We're basically just a hallway filled with books. So as a result of everything being so much different from most other stores, we have to operate in a fashion that's like dramatically different from other stores because our situation is so unique. And as a result, a lot of our operations aren't what you might call in accordance with policy. We do things weird because, well, we have to. But this DM wants things to be in accordance with policy. And he really wants them done sooner rather than later. And it is taking its toll on our employees. I have had numerous conversations with my fellow coworkers who feel overworked and, quite frankly, undervalued. And they find it real easy to target our district manager because he's not lenient and not really empathetic to our situation at all. And I won't lie, I've felt that way too. I mean, it's easy. I've disagreed with a lot of what he's proposed for our store. Now, I'm not a slave. Even if I might be tempted to feel like it sometimes. But Paul's admonition to the believers at Ephesus carries true to me as well. I may not like what I'm told to do. I may disagree with the direction that those above me want me to go. But my service ultimately doesn't go to a supervisor, doesn't go to a manager, or even a CEO. My service is to the God of the universe. And as a result, my duty is to work as I would if it were Jesus Christ who is giving me those orders. Now, that being said, let's go back to Onger's question. Where do you draw the line? I think the line is drawn, and ultimately, you can just put it in very simply. What would Jesus do? If things are unethical, unmoral, if you think that things are just wrong and need to be called out, take that stand. You are a representative. Looks back to verse 1. What particular part, Doc? Precisely. In the Lord. In Christ. I told you, we never get away from those two words. You could read the entire book of Ephesians, and you'll never get past it. So there's some things that this district manager have implemented that aren't ethically wrong, but annoying. Incredibly annoying. And when I consider that I'm supposed to be doing things like I would serve Jesus in that same manner, that's a painful pill to swallow. But even that runs back around to how I felt whenever I didn't get my way with my dad. Remember that? Provoke not. I was stubborn, and I was unwilling to humble myself when no one was wrong and accept that I wasn't the one who needed to be served. God is God, not me. And I know I'm not through learning this. Heaven knows with me, I'm not going to finish learning it on this side of heaven. But I know that the master that I serve is alive within me. And he is willing and able to help me serve him better. Wherever that leads. And that's a comforting thought for me. And I hope it is for you too. Now, I will give another example I didn't actually write down. But within the past year, or I guess a little over a year ago. Full year? No, I guess it was almost right at a year. Our store manager got fired, and it was for ethical reasons. He was, I want to explain it, but it was bad. He was still giving orders, still operating the store, but because of the way he behaved himself, it was a detriment and it was bad, and a man like him should not have been in leadership. And so as a result, my store called him out on it and got him fired. I think that's kind of when it's, quote, okay to make a whip of cords. Like, don't actually pull a Jesus in the temple, please. I know, what would Jesus do? And I know that's within the realm of possibility. But we're not called to just go along with the flow. Sometimes we have to upset the apple cart. Exactly, Cappy. And yes, for those of you who are wondering, I'm getting dinner.
I was gonna say that peanut butter sandwich sounds like it's coming along well there.
It's so tasty that there's no peanut butter and no jelly. Ah. Go ahead, Onger. And no, you can't have my dinner.
Dang it. So first of all, I agree with that. Secondly, both what you said and the fact that I can't have your dinner. But the verse about to the masters, I think it's interesting. It says to stop threatening them, but the first part is do the same to them. Well, what did he just call the bondservants to do to the masters? He's basically called them to serve as if they're serving Christ, right? So the masters are also supposed to serve the people. The leaders are supposed to serve the people following them, the same way Christ would too. This goes back to what we were talking about last week, how submission and leadership look the same in the church, or should look the same in the church. They should look like service.
I can tell he's taking your statements very seriously.
Dang, he beat me to it typing too.
Yes!
Well done.
Thank you. But yeah, it's really cool how it all kind of plays together, and it really does kind of turn everything on its head. That's one thing about Christianity that was pointed out to me. Everything's so backwards. Isn't that great? The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. He who would be the greatest among you must be the servant of all. God chooses the weak to confound the strong. It's great for those who understand it, because they know that the reason that it confounds everyone is because it's not reliant upon us. Any other thoughts, guys? Actually, Kes has her hand raised. I was sorry. I was so distracted by my wondrous rendition of going to the promised land that I completely missed the hand.
Well, I'm a bit distracted by my niece in the next room. She's being held by Dad, and she's very angry about it. Hopefully, you can't hear her.
No.
She's not scared. She's just mad. I think there's a recognition that, or there ought to be, that hopefully when you marry somebody, at least in modern, you're marrying someone who is committed to Jesus like you are. Of course, that wasn't a guarantee back then. But the vast majority of us work for people, I would say, who are not saved. And so that's a complicated situation. And I think there's a danger in saying, well, this is what Jesus would do. You may have to say no to your boss today and then go to work and say yes the next day, because it's a different zone, shall we say, of I don't know how to put it, principle. Like, no, it's a bad idea, but it's not wrong. You can do it and earn your wage in a good conscience, even though you think the whole idea is stupid. You can. I think it goes back to that trying to discern what the will of the Lord is. I mean, that can, not that the Lord's will changes every day, but the situation can change daily. And I've been there. I've been in, you can hear her screaming, huh?
Yep.
Sorry, guys. But like there were some things, obviously, that my bosses have wanted me to do that I absolutely would not do, and got people fired over it. There was another time where I didn't have to take it that far, but like I was requested by the librarian who oversaw our library as well as hers, because ours was a satellite to hers. She says, well, you have to make these kids behave. I flat out told her, I said, I will not get out there and yell and scream. I will call the police or I will not. So I need permission to do that, or I need you to say that you don't want me to do that, because that's all the responses I have. Like, I'm not going to get out there and argue with kids. I'm not going to put myself at risk. Some of them are capable of hitting me. You guys need to figure out what you're going to do and implement without using me as a, I don't know, they just wanted me to get out there and pressure and make myself ugly to maintain order. And I was like, that's a dumb idea and it's risky to me and I'm not going to do it. So figure something. And the situation got worse, not better, but they didn't persist in that. Yes. And and there are other situations like, well, we need to shelve these over here and shelve these over there. And I was like, well, that's stupid because nobody's looking for them over there. But okay, fine, I'll do it. And I'll do it with a good attitude. That's it. I think you guys have heard enough screaming.
It sounds like a lot to consider, doesn't it? Feels like, well, what the line is, sometimes it feels like the line's constantly moving and you walk or toe the line carefully. But I really think that's where it's so helpful that Paul wrote about discerning the will of God. And it's such a comfort to know that the one that we are trying and desperate to know the will of for our life, he lives in us. And we know, we study James. Yeah, you want wisdom? Hey, God gives that away. He's all too eager to dole out wisdom. God is all too happy to help his children. That being said, doesn't always come the way we think it will. The School of Hard Knocks. Side funny note, I have a naturally youthful appearance. Most people don't believe that I'm into my 30s. I've actually had people ask me, what school are you attending? I'm like, the School of Hard Knocks. I thought it was funny. All right. Any other thoughts, guys? Anything you'd like to say? Input? Comments, questions, snide remarks?
Hang on. Stand by.
I will hang. Oh gosh, Ongrith is tighter.
There.
Oh, there. Yes, Ongrith.
Okay. No, I think we covered it pretty well. There's obviously a balancing act, and it's going to differ from situation to situation, job to job, leader to leader, even. But it's always going to be difficult because that's the way work is. I do think that one of the things that I need to check myself on when I'm standing up to my employer and my people above me in the organization is, am I standing up to them because I want to do what's best for the organization and for the people around me, or am I standing up for them because my ego's gotten involved, right? And it's a question that usually clarifies things, and oftentimes I'll take it to I'll take it to somebody who knows enough about the situation to be like, hey, like, is this just me being arrogant, or is this me actually standing up for what's right for everybody? To double check myself, because it's tough to judge yourself sometimes. But that is a question I think that we should ask. Am I doing this for the good of the community, right? Because this whole thing is about the community. This whole section, how to live properly in community. Or am I doing this for my own ego? And sometimes the answer will be, hey, like, I'm keeping my head down when I should be standing up for the good of the community. And sometimes it's, well, this is just an ego thing. No one's going to get hurt by this other than, it's going to be an inconvenience. I've done what I can to try and communicate it. Now I just got to go along with it because it's just my ego getting in the way. So it's just something I wrestle with in this when I deal with these situations.
Yeah, I think it's well said. Because ego plays such a part. When you're, it's like, I don't want to do this because it inconveniences me, because it bothers me that I have to do this. That's something where we can step back and say, okay, am I just being too prideful to follow this because I'm annoyed that I'm not getting my way? Or is it, hey, we shouldn't do this because this is legitimately bad and it's not helpful? It's not benefiting, it's not good, it's either just blatantly unhelpful, or at other times it's just uninformed. I feel like I've got a few of those going on with my work right now. But yeah. I didn't think this would become what it has. That's cool.
I think the fact we're able to discuss this so long shows that we all deal with it in an ongoing manner.
I would say, well, we could just be done with work and not have to worry about it, but then there's a certain verse of Thessalonians that I have to wrestle with. Oh man, Doctor, I'd love to have that conversation with you sometime. Because I have made the statement before that communism is the perfect system. The doctor has identified the problem with communism. It's people. Coincidentally, it's also the problem with capitalism and just about every other system on the planet. But that's a different topic for a different day. All right, guys. Anything else? If not, we'll just go ahead and take prayer requests and close out. Okay. If you guys have any, just go ahead and start typing them out here.